Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Sitting in a Car. I'm Sarah Sproul, and I sit in a car and answer parents' questions about sexuality, consent, and relationships. We are all in the business of raising confident and caring kids who respect themselves and the people around them. So this week, rather than answer a specific question, I want to tell you a story about something that happened in a school this week. I was providing relationship and sexuality education for a school somewhere in Ireland. And at the end of each of the days, I get together with just the girls and then just the boys. So I was sitting in the classroom with just the girls, and we made a circle of chairs. So we're all sitting really close together, and we were talking about things related to periods, generally what happens if you get a period at school, how do we use a tampon, how do we use a pad, all those sort of things. I also, when I'm talking to a group like that, I highlight to them how it's possible that they're not on their own these experiences to do with their period, and they can use their friends as supports. So some of you watching this video or listening to this podcast will remember having your period at school and feeling unsure about whether your pad looked okay, and maybe asking your friend, would you mind just looking? I'm going to go up and put something in the bin. Will you have a look at my uniform and make sure I'm not leaking or nothing's going on? And our friend would tell us everything's fine when we got back. So we were having conversations like that. And I'm always particularly conscious in classes like this that in Ireland, the family is the place where most of these sorts of conversations can take place. Schools are very limited in the sort of sexuality education they can provide. Things are certainly changing, but for the moment, things are very limited. So when I'm in a group like that and I say, and you can come and go and talk to your trusted adult at home or your parent, I'm always conscious that for some people, they don't have an adult they feel they can talk to about these things. And that was certainly highlighted this week, because in this little group of girls, we were talking about how we can go to adults for help and who the adults were in the school, was the secretary and their classroom teacher. But one little girl put up her hand. She would have been 11, and she asked the question, what if I don't want to tell my parents when I get my period? What if I want to keep it to myself? And so as a group, we talked about that. And one of the other girls said, well, in her family, what had happened was the pads were kept in a particular cupboard, and her parent had said to her that this is where the pads are, and so you don't have to come and tell me if you get your period. You can just go and access the pads as you need to. And that was really good. That the girl in the group who was telling that story was really glad to have that opportunity to keep it private. So this reflects a little bit on my experience of getting my period too. So I got my period when I was 12, and I remember not having access to pads and needing to manage my period somehow. And I wanted to keep it to myself. I was embarrassed and I didn't want to talk to my mum about it. So I put lots of toilet paper in my underwear and sort of managed that for a few hours, but it steadily became clear to me that this was not going to be something that I could keep to myself long term, because as some of you will know, if you use toilet paper to try and catch period blood, it pretty much goes straight through and then onto your underwear. And that's what I discovered. So I went to talk to my mom, and of course my mom was great, and she said, oh, this is really exciting, you're going to be a woman now, and here's the pads and here's how you use them. But I was really embarrassed, and I wished I hadn't had to go and talk to her. So this raises two issues for us as parents. The first issue is, for some young kids who are getting their period, they want to keep it private. Like in the human experience, we have all different levels of privacy. Some of us are incredibly private and like to keep things to ourselves, and some people don't mind at all. And certainly our kids at that age, when they're getting their period, will have different levels of comfort in what they're willing to share. But the other thing that I think about is, could it be possible that for some of our kids, their inability or their disinclination to share the fact that they're getting their period with us. Could that be down to the fact that we are not modeling open conversations about periods? Now, certainly, if you feel like your period is a very private thing, then of course, this is not going to be something that you might be able to do. But for the rest of us, if we are reasonably comfortable with our period, that the World Health Organization says that we can start talking to kids as young as 6 about what menstruation is. And if we do it in a very matter-of-fact way, and we're talking about, this thing that happens and why it happens, and it's really useful that it happens because it's part of how we create new human beings, and this is how we manage it, and it happens to me all the time. And if we just start talking about it, then it is quite possible that need for privacy and that feeling of not wanting to talk to people about our first period when it happens, or not wanting to try and approach our trusted adult to get help, may be sort of mitigated. That feeling of, I don't want to talk to anyone, may be reduced because we have been demonstrating for, let's say, if we start when our kid is 6 and they get their period, say, when they're 12, that's 6 years of being constantly shown that periods are something we can talk about. They're not embarrassing. We talk about them in our home, and that's fine. So have a think about that. What you're thinking about is, what are your levels of privacy? How comfortable do you feel about talking about your period if you have a period? And second of all, acknowledging that we all have different levels and needs for privacy, and our kids will have that too. And how can we minimize the discomfort they have around talking about periods? I hope that's helpful. That is an issue that came up in a school that I was talking at this week. It's about periods and about helping our young person to be able to seek an adult's help when they get their first period. And that's sitting in a car for another week, where I've answered a question to help you talk about sexuality, consent, and relationships, so you can raise a confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. Bye for now.